Now, guys, listen, man. The world doesn't give a about men. They just don't. Yes, there are some people who do care about men, but by and large, the world doesn't give a shit about us. That's fine. We're men. We're built to handle this. This is what we do. This is our masculine burden of performance. Being a man in this day and age is kind of a thankless job. It is what it is.
It is what it is.
It is what it is. It's something that men need to surrender to. You just need to understand female nature. Just understand that she can never love you for love as you've been told, as we've been sold our entire lives, till death do us part, and sickness and health, and blah, 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 and all that stuff.
Why do men feel obligated to give women a better life, and why do women still resent men despite this?
I think that it is not only the social and biological responsibility, but also the moral responsibility of men to provide a better life for all the people that are in their families and in their community. And I don't think that doesn't extend to women. And I think that women having a problem with that is them being brainwashed by society, telling them that they have to be more than they are. And I think that there's more than enough room for women to also contribute. And I don't think that there's any reason for people to have a contentious view on it either way.
Why should men embrace masculinity to serve a society that seems to hate them?
Well, we still got to defend the country. A lot of guys are out there now, and women do a great job in the military too. But traditionally, it's been the men in combat training and combat situations. So you got to be masculine. You want to win the fight. We'll say it like that. You got to train and win the fight.
Why have men been tricked into thinking that it's unmanly to advocate for themselves?
Unmanly to advocate for themselves.
In other words, men are expected to sacrifice.
Yeah. We'll answer it in a Christian perspective. When Jesus died on the cross, he sacrificed himself to save everyone.
What makes a man weak?
What weakens a man is no sense of direction, no sense of actual goal, no sense of purpose. That weakens every man.
What makes a man weak? I feel like if you let a lady or a younger lady run over you, that makes you weak. But if you like leading and stuff like that, everything should be good.
Are men more weak because they simp for women or because they don't fight for their rights?
We love a good simp, but ain't nothing wrong with no simp. You want to be a simp, that's cool. And if you want to fight for your rights, that's cool too, but you got to simp for your girl.
Are men more weak because they simp for women or because they don't fight for their rights?
A little bit of both, but I think more simp for women because men become yes men around women, and that's the problem.
How can you change women's sense of entitlement without first changing men's sense of obligation?
Oh, that's a tough question. Maybe equality would help, being both equal, but I have a conservative. The guy's the head of the house, but the female is very important. Equal, but when it comes to some decisions, I think the guys should make it and not be afraid to make it. Be the leadership role, patriarchy.
Does a strong man take abuse or does a weak man take abuse?
That's both.
I would say a weak man takes abuse. I would say a strong man might handle abuse, but they don't take it. They might accept it, but they will deal with it. Whereas your framing of accepting it alludes to me that they're not going to make any steps towards correction. And so if you're not making any steps toward correction, that's weakness. Not having any boundaries of your own is weakness.
So why are we told that real men are made from suffering?
From suffering? Well, suffering will give you character, Suffering isn't a bad thing.
So at what point does masculinity turn into masochism?
Good question. Wow, that is a tough one to answer. Oh, if you're defending someone that is, in a vulnerable position, I don't think you're a masochist. But if you want to beat people up all the time, then you might be crossing that border. I'll say it like that.
That's more of a history issue because there's this paradigm within history that like soft times make hard men and hard men make soft times, I'm oversimplifying, but you would understand what I'm saying. So I'm not sure that concept is as nuanced as reality, but I understand where it's coming from.
At what point does masculinity turn into masochism?
When it gets weak and it allows abuse.
How can men's issues ever be heard if we're told that real men don't complain?
I think the aspect of real men don't complain is, again, an unnuanced issue of dealing with what's the antiquated views of masculinity. And I think that standing up for yourself is actually more in line with true masculinity.
How can men's issues ever be heard if we're told that real men don't complain?
That's true. Because when you open your mouth, women have a problem, people have a problem, so gotta kind of tough it out.
Why is it that men will reluctantly accept their fate anytime an injustice is pointed out? That's just the way it is, or it's just part of being a man?
I mean, we're programmed to think that that's how a man's supposed to be, but it's not. But it's just the way it is.
So then why do people say that it's biology?
It's not biology. It's more like a psychology thing. You know, it's more psychological than anything.
Why would women appreciate the sacrifices men make if men are going to continue making those sacrifices regardless of how they are treated?
Because they have positive self-awareness, and they understand that not every choice that is made is an easy choice, and that some are beneficial to the group and not an individual. And if they have some self-awareness, they'll recognize that you're witnessing something that is not that's not selfish, it's selfless.
Isn't the dating crisis just a symptom of how men are treated in society?
Maybe.
The dating crisis. Yeah, you know, back in the 50s, men were raised to be a certain way, and so were the women. And now that it's 2025, there's different expectations. So I'll just answer it like that.
If men continue sacrificing for a system that doesn't value them, what will happen in the long run? What's the breaking point?
Yeah, you could have a breakdown in the family. You could have some men they got to be strong.
I'd like to think men are strong enough that there will be no breaking point, that they would just hold the line and do what's necessary. But in the hyperbolic kind of like worst case scenario situation that might be being posed here, there's an argument to be made that, like, if you believe in a repressive culture, then you might believe that men would restrict women's rights to, say, something similar to Sharia law. I don't think that would happen in the West at all, but I think from the framing of the question that's the through line of what the idea is, right? So,
if the civil rights movement had said it is what it is, would anything have changed?
No, the civil rights. Dr. Martin Luther King was very well versed, and he stood his ground, and he paid the ultimate price. So, no, it isn't what it is. Sometimes you got to stand your ground and keep pressing forward.
So why weren't black people or women told to move or improve when fighting for their rights, but men are?
I think that's where it started becoming like a tender subject, where you can't say certain things and stuff like that because you don't want to kind of offend the wrong person. And that's the problem, where we just don't want to offend anyone. But I think at some point we have to still be ourselves and offend. You can't please everybody, right? So that's just my perspective.
Would a women's advocacy group tell them to leave the country rather than change laws?
No.
So why are we telling that to men?
That's true. We shouldn't be telling that to men at all. Men kill themselves way more than women do. I think we should be more understanding with our men.
Why do men complain about the way men are treated and have harder lives, at the same time they want to keep men in roles that oppress them?
That's a sense of duty issue. Men have a sense of duty to uphold what we have been told we're supposed to do, but I also think it's valid that men should be able to complain about things that are valid complaints. I think that every person who has a point of view, period, should be able to express the ups and downs of that point of view.
What are men complaining about if they don't want to improve their oppressive conditions?
A lack of gratitude.
The women's liberation movement fought for and won voting rights, workplace equality, reproductive rights, and protections against gender discrimination. Why haven't men organized to fight for their equal rights to women?
I don't think men understand that they're being under attack right now. Right now, they're kind of blind to it. They still haven't been awoken to the fact that it's true, man is being attacked right now.
Harriet Tubman once said, "I freed 1,000 slaves. I could have freed 1,000 more if only they knew they were slaves." How does this apply to modern men?
Same thing, you could tell a man, it's like I said, you tell a man, stop, be a man and, overcome but nobody wants to listen. And why we don't sit there and take the time and just be like, listen, how's your day going? What's going on with you? Are you okay? So it's, we just brush them to the side.
How many men don't even realize they're being oppressed?
90% of them.
Why is it that men will reluctantly accept their fate anytime an injustice is pointed out? That's just the way it is, or that's just part of being a man?
I don't know why some men do that. I don't.
Why can't men seem to fathom that things could possibly be any other way?
I understand the way that the pointing of these questions is going, and I do understand where you're coming from. I do think that there is a large hill in front of men today, but I don't think that hill should be viewed differently than any other challenge that men have ever had to face in history, because overcoming dumb cultural norms is not worse than death or genocide or any of the things that people actually had to deal with that were real problems in the past.
Weren't men sent to die in war? I mean, wasn't that kind of like a...
Conscription was the thing for sure. For sure. Yes. Men were definitely sent to war without their consent. That was definitely a thing. But that's the male role, is to be the protector. And I understand that might be sexist to some people's point of view, but I think that that's just denying basic biological principles.
Why are we more concerned with navigating the problem than fixing the problem?
I think we should stop navigating the problem and start fixing the problem. But the real issue is that men think that they are not being oppressed, but they are actually being, and they don't know about it.
How are men being oppressed, and why don't they know about it?
Men are being oppressed because women have taken over everything. I mean, they have rights, they have legal laws, they have the law backing them, they have judges backing them, they have the whole public backing them. They just feel entitled.
The women really got together and were pretty tough. They were pretty strong. And there's strength in numbers.
Women got their rights, it's good for them. But I think men should get together as well. Men just feel that, they don't have rights, or, they're just supposed to be the perfect people. But I think it's men are being abused too, and they must come together. But I don't know how long it's going to take for men to realize, that it's high time that they come together.
The gay rights movement led to legalization of same-sex marriage, anti-discrimination laws, and increased social acceptance. What victories has the men's movement achieved in comparison?
Men's movement have achieved nothing. Men are being abused left, right, and center. It's high time we have a movement at all. We don't have it.
If women and LGBT activists successfully fought for their rights, what excuse do men have for not organizing to fight for theirs?
I guess the idea with that men don't feel like they need to organize because they already have what they think they need, and it would almost be a waste of time because they would just be arguing. The argument from the feminism side would be, there's no reason for you to be out here. You're just arguing to keep women oppressed. And because men don't view themselves as oppressors of women, the entire issue is a non-issue, and it just seems hyperbolic from this side.
I feel like, okay, so men's excuse could be them not having enough leaders, enough people that they're willing to take the initiative to be like, all right, let me listen to that person because he clearly knows what he's talking about. I really think if we had more of that, then yeah, we'd see, that change.
When it comes to these manosphere creators, if strong masculine men are supposed to show leadership and take action, why are they all talk and no action? Where is the leadership fighting for men's rights?
Man, yeah, that's hard. I really feel like, these red pill groups, I think a lot of what they're doing is to benefit on themselves.
I think the manosphere is mostly a trolling effort by people who want to be famous online. I don't think that that's an actual advocacy group for men. And I think that most men who actually have self-security and positions of institution aren't worried about what the manosphere has to say, or what the feminists, I don't mean to say feminists, but the female side of that argument has to say about the manosphere, because it doesn't connect with them.
Who do you think resists this message more, men or women?
Women.
Would you be surprised to know that men push back more when I'm advocating for them?
I would actually not be surprised by that. I would say that that's in line because men don't want to appear to be victims, and that they want to say, hey, I'm fine, don't worry about me, like, I'm strong. And I think that is in line with what we've mostly been talking about here, that ultimately the battle has been one-sided because there's only one side that feels like they need to battle.
If men can't be seen as victims, wouldn't that be the very thing that makes them the biggest victims?
I can definitely see where you're coming from a dehumanization like argument in terms of like cultural history. Like that actually is a really, really good point to be made. But I also don't believe that the issue is inherently deep enough to cause the fissure that has been created in historical issues. Does that make sense?
Should people accept that life isn't fair? And if so, why bother fighting for any social change?
Well, life isn't fair, and you know, you got to take some, but sometimes you got to stand your ground and move forward to change things. You know, change isn't always bad.
Because if you don't fight, then nothing will change. I mean, you got to fight, you got to stand your ground and overcome adversity. The generations before us didn't, you know, we got to keep it going. I mean, it's always going to need some change. We always got to need something better.
How do we decide what's worth fighting for?
I feel like we all have a soul, and deep down in your soul, you kind of know what's wrong and you know what's right.
Feminists didn't just complain about discrimination, they protested, lobbied, and forced legal changes. Why do men think complaining alone will change their circumstances?
It won't. It won't. It won't. Not making a reel, not making a video. We got to stand together, organize ourselves, and come correctly.
Harriet Tubman once said, "I freed 1,000 slaves. I could have freed 1,000 more if only they knew they were slaves." How does this apply to modern men?
The question implies that men across our culture are victims and enslaved to the conformity of the conversational structure and approachal structure of modern women. And I think they just need to be freed from that box, because most people within reality aren't so pigeonholed into specific groups. There's a lot of nuance, and if you just got out of your comfort zone and talked to people, you'd probably realize that.
So, if men fought to liberate women, why aren't women fighting to liberate men?
Not their job.
Why was it our job to liberate them?
It's our job.
Why do we have a job but they don't?
That's as a traditional man with 3 young daughters, that's our role. That's what it is. As men, we are protectors, and I'm not ashamed to say that.
It is what it is. Thank you.